You know, historically, when cartographers used to draw maps, they would mark the absolute edges of the known world with, like, literal sea monsters.
Right, the classic "Here be dragons" sketches.
Exactly. They'd draw these terrifying leviathans because there was this vast, intimidating physical frontier left to conquer. I mean, people were quite literally sailing into a void.
Well, and it was all about the thrill of the completely unknown, right? A blank space on the parchment meant possibility or danger and just unadulterated discovery.
But today, I mean, the map is entirely full. We have high-resolution satellite imagery of every single square inch of the globe sitting in our pockets right now.
Yeah, you can zoom in on a grain of sand from orbit if you want to.
Totally. So the frontier has fundamentally changed. We aren't really looking for uncharted land anymore. We're aggressively hunting for the perfect untouched escape. We kind of want the illusion of being the first person to discover a paradise, even if, it's been photographed a million times.
Which brings us right to the core of what we are unpacking in today's deep dive, because we are looking at how the modern travel industry, and I mean everyone, from algorithmic tech giants to hyper-niche digital nomads, how they define the best coastal escape on Earth right now in the year 2026.
And the criteria for what makes a destination premier is undergoing this massive structural shift. We have a literal pile of sources to sort through today. We've got heavyweights like TripAdvisor, AFAR Magazine, Travel and Leisure, BBC Travel.
Oh, and don't forget the specialized blogs, too, like Sand in My Suitcase and Wanderlust Chloe.
Right. And the mission today isn't just to rattle off a list of nice beaches for you. We want to decode exactly how the travel industry and global wanderers are defining the best escapes today. And we are doing this specifically for you listening right now.
Yeah, whether you're actively plotting out some elaborate international itinerary
Or you're just sitting at your desk, desperately wanting to virtually escape your daily routine for 20 minutes. We're going to decode the modern map of paradise for you. So let's jump right into this. When you look at the heaviest hitters in the travel space, you immediately notice a reliance on just the sheer scale of data.
Oh, absolutely. We're seeing platforms attempt to quantify shores on an industrial level.
It's wild. Like, let's look at the TripAdvisor Traveler's Choice Beaches list.
Right. So when a beach makes that specific cut, you are witnessing the culmination of an immense crowdsourced data architecture. Millions of user inputs, star ratings, written reviews. They're all algorithmically processed to surface this sort of democratic consensus.
Okay, I see the appeal of the wisdom of the crowds from a business perspective. But I actually have to interrupt here with a point of genuine confusion because
Sure, go ahead.
if we are searching for a premier escape, doesn't a crowdsourced algorithm inherently defeat the entire premise?
How do you mean?
Well, by definition, if a beach has 50,000 five-star reviews, it means 50,000 people were literally just there. That sounds like a parking lot to me, not a pristine escape. It's like comparing a fast food popularity contest to a Michelin star guide. Mass appeal versus true exclusivity.
That is the exact paradox at the heart of mass market travel data. It's a great analogy. To understand why this happens, you really have to look at how the algorithm is physically weighted.
Right, because it's not just counting stars.
Exactly. Platforms like TripAdvisor, they prioritize volume, they look at the recency of reviews and overall engagement. And for a location to generate that sheer volume of data, it requires really robust infrastructure.
Oh, so it needs paved access roads, ample public restrooms, that kind of thing.
Yes, nearby hospitality sectors and crucially strong cellular service, because tourists need to upload their content in real time.
Wow. So the algorithm is technically blind to isolation?
Completely.
It mathematically cannot reward a hidden cove that takes a 3-hour trek through dense jungle because the handful of people who actually make it there aren't generating enough data points to trigger the trending metrics.
You nailed it. What these platforms are actually measuring is the most universally frictionless coastal experience at scale.
Frictionless. That's the perfect word for it. They measure convenience intertwined with, like, a baseline of natural beauty.
Right. But that algorithmic bias is precisely what creates a massive market for the opposite approach. And this is where you see editorial entities stepping in as a counterweight, like AFAR Magazine or that dedicated ranking platform, worlds50beaches.com.
Yeah, it's like they're essentially saying, we don't care what the raw data says.
Pretty much. They utilize a board of seasoned travel journalists and editors who actually sit in a room, debate subjective criteria, and physically handpick locations.
To correct the bias.
Exactly. They attempt to correct the algorithmic bias by elevating beaches that might only see, say, a few hundred visitors a year. They argue that the pristine ecology or the absolute silence makes it objectively superior to the popular resort town down the coast.
It really reminds me of the music industry. Like, TripAdvisor is the pop radio algorithm pushing the catchiest, most accessible song with the highest stream count. It's engineered to be liked by the maximum number of people.
Right, the mass market appeal.
Yeah. Whereas A4 Magazine operates way more like an independent record label curating, like limited edition vinyl. They are banking on their own refined taste, acting as tastemakers rather than just data reporters.
That is a highly accurate way to frame the divide. You have the volume of satisfaction warring against the discerning eye of the connoisseur.
But wait, if mass consensus inherently destroys the escape factor, how do travelers actually find isolation today? Because looking at the landscape of these 2026 sources, that backlash against the megalists is driving a completely new strategy in travel media.
Oh, totally. The giant top 50 listicles are starting to feel a bit outdated.
Right. Instead, we're seeing the aggressive rise of the hyper-curated, deliberately limited recommendation.
The intentional scarcity of choice? It is such a fascinating pivot in editorial strategy.
It really is. I noticed this across several incredibly recent publications. For instance, BBC Travel published a piece just days ago, March 24, 2026, and the title is strikingly specific. It's literally called 8 of the World's Best Beach Escapes.
Just 8.
Not a top 10, not a sprawling top 50, exactly 8. And then you have a digital creator, the Wanderlust Chloe blog, highlighting the world's top 9 amazing beaches for Wanderlusters.
Well, to understand the power of that, you have to look at the psychology of asymmetrical odd numbers in marketing and journalism.
Oh, I'm fascinated by this. Why 8 or 9?
Well, for decades, the top 10 was the undisputed king of formatting. It is a really satisfying round decimal number. But over time, consumers became incredibly savvy to the fact that a top 10 list usually implies the author started with the format and worked backward to fill the slots.
Oh, like they found 7 good ones and had to just make up the rest.
Exactly. It feels manufactured, like they had to pad the list with a mediocre 9th or 10th option just to hit the quota.
That makes total sense, like an overstuffed menu at a diner.
Yeah.
So when BBC Travel publishes a list of exactly 8 escapes, it subliminally communicates this sense of ruthless filtering to the reader.
Yes, precisely.
It implies they scoured the entire planet, applied an impossibly strict set of criteria, and stopped the moment the standard wasn't met. Whether it yielded 5, 8, or 11 spots, it's like a high-end chef's tasting menu.
Oh, I love that comparison.
Right. A chef doesn't give you 10 courses just to hit a round number. They give you exactly 8 or 9 specific bites to tell a complete story.
It projects absolute authenticity. Think of it like minimalist architectural design. An architect doesn't add a superfluous pillar just to make a room symmetrical. Every single element must serve a structural or aesthetic purpose. By stripping away the filler, those remaining 8 beaches carry significantly more editorial weight.
But it makes me wonder, how does the definition of an escape change when a massive global broadcaster like the BBC limits its global recommendations to just 8 distinct locations?
Well, the criteria completely fracture based on who is doing the filtering. Look at the Wanderlust Chloe source you mentioned.
Right, it's top 9.
By explicitly targeting Wanderlusters for her top 9, the metric pivots sharply away from traditional relaxation. I mean, a Wanderluster isn't typically looking for a manicured resort with a swim-up bar.
No, definitely not.
The metric becomes entirely about kinetic energy, cultural immersion, and perhaps a deliberate lack of modern comfort.
And then contrast that with another specialized blog we examined, Sand in My Suitcase. They basically abandon the overarching concept of best entirely and hone in on the prettiest beaches in the world.
Which is such a brilliant distinction because they're applying a purely optical metric.
Exactly. If a beach is ranked solely on being the prettiest, it completely ignores swimmability. I mean, the water could be heavily infested with jellyfish, or the undertow could be completely lethal, or the temperature could be near freezing.
But if the juxtaposition of the sand against the sunset photographs perfectly...
Wins the category. It's wild.
You know, this is actually a perfect moment to pause and consider the practical application of all this. Because if you, the listener, had to choose right now, how are you optimizing your precious paid time off?
Yeah, what are you actually looking for?
Are you hunting for the perfect high-contrast aesthetic to capture through a lens? Are you seeking the sheer, terrifying isolation of a place with zero cell towers? Or do you just want the frictionless comfort of the highest-rated amenities?
Because the algorithm or the curator you choose to trust will totally dictate your physical reality once you step off that plane. So let's actually move from the theory of list making to that physical dirt and sand. Because when we examine the actual geographic locations highlighted across these 2026 publications, the contrast is just staggering.
Oh, it really is. We are looking at two explicitly named shorelines that prove just how wild the spectrum of a premier coastal escape has become.
Right. On one side of the globe, Travel and Leisure places a really heavy spotlight on Calamariolo Beach in Sardinia, Italy.
The classic European ideal.
Exactly. But then, juxtaposed against that, we have a piece from the Daily Hive Vancouver detailing a specific BC beach, British Columbia, that holds a highly unusual title. They crown it the longest in the world worth visiting.
The geological and atmospheric differences between these two locations perfectly encapsulate the bifurcated desires of the modern traveler. Let's look at Calamariolo first.
Okay, set the scene for us.
So you are dealing with the quintessential, highly concentrated Mediterranean allure. This is an isolated cove in the Gulf of Orsay, and it's accessible almost exclusively by boat or by an incredibly grueling mountain hike.
And the defining feature of Calamariolo isn't sand, right? It's the pebbles.
That is the mechanical secret to its fame, actually.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, the surrounding landscape is characterized by this striking limestone karst topography. Over millennia, the sea and the wind have eroded these towering limestone cliffs, breaking them down into perfectly smooth, tiny white pebbles that basically blanket the entire shore.
Which plays a crucial role in the water quality, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Think about fine sand. It kicks up silt when the waves roll in, which clouds the water. But because Calamariolo is lined with these relatively heavy, smooth limestone pebbles, the water remains entirely undisturbed.
Oh, wow. I never thought about that physics of it.
Yeah, that is the physical mechanism behind why the water there is that impossible translucent turquoise. The sunlight hits the white pebbles at the bottom and reflects straight back up through crystal clear water.
It sounds like a masterfully cut diamond. You know, it's small, it's structurally flawless, and it's highly concentrated luxury, like a perfectly pulled concentrated shot of Italian espresso.
Oh, that's a brilliant way to put it.
You go there for a completely passive escape. You lay your towel on the smooth stones, you soak in the Mediterranean sun, and you just exist in a state of pure, indulgent stillness.
But then you pan across the globe to the Pacific Northwest of North America, British Columbia.
A completely different universe.
Exactly. The Daily Hive is highlighting a coastline whose primary selling point has absolutely nothing to do with stillness, warmth, or translucent water. I mean, the North Pacific is famously turbulent and frigid.
I am just so obsessed with the hilarious qualifier the Daily Hive uses in their title, longest in the world, worth visiting.
It is a phenomenal piece of editorial phrasing, isn't it?
Right.
Because it implies this monumental caveat.
It really does. The author is essentially admitting, like, look, mathematically speaking, there are definitely longer continuous stretches of sand on Earth. There is probably a longer beach bordering a bleak industrial shipping lane or stretching across some desolate, freezing mudflat.
Right, but those places are miserable to actually experience.
Exactly. They had to append the phrase worth visiting to filter out the coastlines that are massive just for the sake of being massive.
Well, the qualifier filters for atmosphere. And the atmosphere of the British Columbia coast is just overwhelming. We are talking about the collision of tectonic plates creating dramatic, rugged shorelines.
It's not a sunbathing spot.
No, not at all. You have ancient temperate rainforests, literally some of the oldest old-growth trees on the continent growing right up to the high tide line. You don't go there to relax. The fog and the atmospheric rivers often bring this chilling, almost cinematic mist to the region.
You go there to feel small. I mean, if Calamariolo is the diamond or the espresso shot, the BC beach is a sprawling multi-day hiking marathon.
Totally. It's an active escape.
You go to traverse miles of hard-packed sand, to climb over bleached driftwood the size of literal school buses, and to breathe in that freezing salted air.
What this geographic extreme demonstrates is that the travel industry has finally accepted that the ultimate escape is not a monolith. The industry has fractured to serve completely different nervous systems.
Oh, I like that phrase. Different nervous systems.
Yeah, one destination regulates you through heat and stillness, while the other stimulates you through scale and raw elemental power.
So synthesizing everything we've decoded today from this really extensive stack of 2026 travel media, what does this map of paradise actually look like now?
I think it looks like a
The overarching takeaway for you listening right now is that you really have to define your own metric before you can read the modern map. The best beach in the world doesn't exist objectively. It only exists in relation to the specific type of exhaustion you are trying to cure.
That's very true. But, there is an underlying tension to all of this media coverage that travelers rarely acknowledge.
Oh, like the friction between discovery and preservation.
Exactly that. Let's call it the observer effect of travel lists.
The observer effect, like in physics.
Right. In physics, the observer effect states that the mere act of observing a phenomenon inevitably changes that phenomenon. We see the exact same mechanism in travel journalism.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
When a massive global publisher crowns a quiet, pristine shoreline as a premier escape, the publication inherently alters the destination's future. The sudden influx of attention, capital, and foot traffic begins to rapidly erode the very isolation and charm that made the location worthy of the list in the first place.
It is the ultimate paradox. The map maker basically destroys the frontier just by drawing it. Once the X is placed on the map, the crowds are guaranteed to follow, the infrastructure is going to be built, and the algorithm will eventually just take over.
It's unavoidable.
Which leaves us with a rather wild thought to close on. If the physical globe is fully mapped, and every hidden cove is eventually destined to be geotagged, monetized, and ranked on some listicle, where does the concept of an untouched escape even go next?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right. As virtual reality and spatial computing reach total photorealism by the end of this decade, will the next generation's premier coastal escape even require a passport? Or will the ultimate, pristine, perfectly temperature-controlled beach exist entirely on a private server?
A literal virtual paradise.
Exactly. An escape totally free from crowds, algorithms, and eroding limestone. It's definitely something to ponder the next time you were scrolling through your feed, desperately searching for paradise.